The first time Emma Collins heard the name Apex Terror, it was murmured like a threat behind a row of newly released novels. The hushed voice was unfamiliar, but the intent behind it? Chilling. She froze in place, halfway through rearranging a stack of architecture books. "He won't see it coming," the voice said, calm and confident. "By the time the zoning board finds out, Apex Terror will own the rights. Carter will be finished." Emma ducked lower, pretending to tie her shoe, heart pounding. Carter, Ethan Carter, was a regular at the bookstore, a man too genuine for the suits he wore. Just 2 hours before, Ethan had sat at her events counter, sipping espresso with his usual distant look, the kind of man who always seemed to be building cities in his head while making eye contact. Emma had teased him about missing yet another poetry night, and he'd laughed, a rare sound that cracked through his otherwise polished veneer. That same man, now casually discussed as the target of what sounded like corporate sabotage. She knew she couldn't ignore it. But who would believe her? She was just a bookstore manager with an overactive sense of justice. That evening, long after the last customer had wandered out into the foggy Seattle night, Emma replayed the conversation in her head. She couldn't remember much about the man who had spoken, only that he wore a navy trench coat and had a voice like sandpaper. On velvet. Still, the name Apex Terror stuck. It wasn't one she'd heard before, but if someone was plotting against Ethan, he had a right to know. She wasn't even sure why she cared so much. Maybe it was his kindness, or maybe the way he listened to her ideas like they mattered. The next day, Ethan returned. As always, he walked straight to the design section, then to her desk, holding 2 cappuccinos. "Peace offering for missing poetry night," he said with a smile. She hesitated, then decided to risk it. "Ethan, can I ask you something off the record?" His smile faded slightly, replaced by concern. "Sure." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Have you ever heard of Apex Terror?" His brows knit together, expression sharpening instantly. "Where did you hear that name?" She blinked. "A customer yesterday. It sounded, shady, like they were planning something. Against you." He didn't laugh. That was what struck her most. No forced chuckle, no gentle dismissal. Instead, he stared at her like she'd just handed him a missing puzzle piece. "They're a development firm. Aggressive, private. Not many people even know that name outside city council." He rubbed his jaw. "We're bidding on the same district, waterfront expansion. If they beat us to rezoning..." His words trailed off, the implication clear. Emma watched as the mask of calm slipped. "And they mentioned me?" She nodded. "By name. And something about zoning manipulation." Ethan leaned back, his gaze distant again, but this time not with creativity, with calculation. "That can't be a coincidence. Yesterday my head of operations mentioned some irregularities with the city permits. I brushed it off." He looked at her, really looked at her. "Emma, this could be big." Her pulse quickened. "So what do you do?" "I do what architects hate doing," he said, half smiling. "I start digging through paperwork instead of building with it." She smiled faintly, but concern lingered. "Be careful. Whoever they are, they're not playing fair." He nodded, then added something she didn't expect. "Thank you for telling me. Most people wouldn't." Emma shrugged. "Most people don't spend their lunch breaks sketching bridges and quoting Pablo Neruda at bookstore managers." For the first time that day, his smile returned. Touché. That night, long after the store lights dimmed, Emma found herself wondering why a man like Ethan Carter made her nervous in a way that wasn't fear, but something far more dangerous. 2 days later, he returned, but something had shifted. He looked tired, distracted, like a man dragging too many secrets behind him. She noticed the folder under his arm, thick and overstuffed. "You were right," he said, skipping pleasantries. Someone's leaking internal documents, blueprint proposals, development plans, things only 3 people should have access to. Emma folded her arms. You think it's Apex Terra? It's someone feeding Apex, he clarified. From inside my own firm. Emma's stomach dropped. Do you know who? Ethan hesitated. I have my suspicions, but I need proof. If I confront the wrong person, I lose everything. His voice was tight. And there's another problem. What? She asked. He looked at her, eyes clouded. One of the 3 with access is my best friend, Daniel Reed. Emma remembered Daniel vaguely, a charming, smooth-talking man she'd seen with Ethan once at a signing event. Always smiling, always scanning the room. You think it's him? I think I don't want it to be. Ethan sighed. He's been with me since grad school. We built this firm together, but lately, things have felt off. Emma exhaled slowly. So what now? Now, he said, I trust no one, and I verify everything. There was a silence. Then, soft but firm, Emma added, You're not alone in this. Not anymore. Outside, rain began to tap against the bookstore windows, as if the city itself knew a storm was coming. 3 nights later, Emma found herself standing outside Carter Urban Designs, clutching a brown paper bag with 2 sandwiches and a single question pounding in her chest. Why did she care this much? She wasn't part of Ethan's world, didn't speak in blueprints or contracts. Yet here she was, choosing his corner of the battlefield, without knowing how much blood it might cost. The sleek glass building loomed above her, every light on the top floor still burning. When she entered the lobby, the security guard barely glanced up. He's still upstairs, he said. Didn't even leave for dinner. Emma nodded and made her way up. Ethan didn't hear her knock. He was bent over a conference table, littered with maps, permit applications, and sticky notes full of scribbles. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, tie forgotten somewhere on the floor. Emma stepped inside, quietly placing the food on the edge of the table. You look like you're about to turn into a floor plan, she said softly. Ethan looked up, startled, then smiled. You brought food. I think I love you. He paused. Platonically, for now. She laughed, and the tension broke, just for a second. As they sat and ate, the room softened. But not for long. So, she said, any luck finding the leak? Ethan shook his head. Every time I think I'm close, something shifts. Either the files vanish, or someone conveniently covers their tracks. He tapped a file. But I found something odd. A development application submitted last month in my name, except I didn't submit it. Emma frowned. Forged. Almost perfect. Almost. He handed her a page. Look at the signature. She leaned in. That's your name, but slightly off. Exactly, he said. That curl on the C, I don't write it like that, but Daniel does. Her eyes widened. You think he forged your signature? He's the only one who's ever signed documents on my behalf with authority. Years ago, when we were smaller. Ethan's voice dropped. He would know how to mimic my style, but not perfectly. And if I push this, he didn't finish. She could guess. If he accused Daniel and was wrong, or worse, if Daniel flipped it on him, it could wreck the company before the bidding process even began. So what's your next move? She asked. Surveillance, digital and personal. Chloe's helping me. Chloe? Emma asked. My sister, he explained. Criminal defense attorney, scares people without raising her voice. Emma smiled. I like her already. Ethan nodded. She's digging into Apex's past deals. If they've pulled something like this before, we'll find it. Emma glanced at the scattered papers. This feels bigger than just a development bid. Ethan nodded. It is. Apex doesn't just want to win. They want to destroy anyone who threatens them. I'm just the latest obstacle. Emma stood and walked to the window, looking down at the glowing city. You're in dangerous territory, Ethan. Yeah, he said, joining her, but I'd rather be here than blind. She turned to him. And what about Daniel? If it's true, if he's behind this, what will you do? Ethan was silent for a moment, then said, He's like a brother to me. But if he betrayed me, I won't hesitate. There was steel in his voice, not anger, resolve. Later that night, as Emma left the building, she noticed a black SUV parked across the street. It wasn't the car itself that bothered her, it was the stillness. The engine off, the driver's silhouette barely visible behind tinted glass. She quickened her pace, heart hammering, not daring to look back. Inside the SUV, a phone screen glowed. A voice on the other end said, She's involved now. And the driver responded, Then we'll have to deal with her too. The next day, the bookstore was unusually quiet. Emma tried to shake the memory of the SUV, but the unease clung like fog. Around noon, Chloe Carter arrived, dressed in dark jeans and a leather blazer that screamed courtroom precision. You're Emma? She asked without introduction. Yes, Emma replied, slightly breathless. I've heard about you, Chloe said. Smart, observant, loyal. I like you already. Emma smiled nervously. Do I get to like you back? Or is this a trial run? Chloe chuckled. Let's see how you handle classified intel. They sat in the reading corner, where Chloe pulled out a USB drive. 3 ex-employees from firms Apex Terra partnered with. 2 bankrupt, 1 missing, patterns, same timeline, same city council liaisons. Emma's eyes widened. Why isn't this public? Buried in red tape, legal threats, NDAs, but Ethan's firm is clean. No debt, no leverage. They can't scare him into silence, so they're trying to frame him instead. Emma exhaled. And Daniel? Too clean, Chloe said. No digital footprint beyond the sanitized version. That's a red flag in itself. That evening, Emma told Ethan everything she'd seen about the SUV. He went pale. We're being watched. You are, she said, but I'm not walking away. Ethan looked at her, eyes stormy. Emma, this isn't your fight. It is now, she said. They made it personal. The room went still. Then Ethan said quietly, Then we fight together. Unseen to them across the street, a camera lens clicked shut. The following week unfolded like a slow-moving avalanche. Ethan barely slept. Chloe bounced between courtrooms and conference rooms, leaving a wake of intimidated executives. And Emma, now fully embedded in a world far beyond books and author signings, found herself decoding building permits and analyzing internal emails like a forensic investigator. What started as a whispered threat in a bookstore was now unraveling into something systemic, something far more coordinated than any of them anticipated. At Carter Urban Designs, the mood shifted from creative to clinical. Security protocols tightened, keycards were reissued, email traffic was monitored. One morning, Ethan walked into the server room to find Chloe already there, standing with the head of IT. 3 login attempts at 2:04 a.m., she said without looking at him. Admin account, internal network, denied access, but someone's probing. Ethan frowned. Remote access. Worse, she said, local terminal. Whoever's doing this is in the building. Ethan stared at the row of servers, something dark flickering in his expression. Daniel? Chloe didn't answer. She didn't have to. They both knew, but assumptions weren't proof. And Ethan was still clinging to the hope that there was another explanation. Chloe, on the other hand, had already built a legal case in her head. If he's involved, she said, I'll bury him. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. I need to be sure before I confront him. I need something irrefutable. Chloe's voice dropped. You're giving him time to tighten the noose. That night, Ethan met Emma at a late-night diner, far from the downtown buzz. Over pie and lukewarm coffee, he confided in her, really confided, about the firm's origins. How he and Daniel had started it from nothing, sketching ideas on bar napkins and sleeping in the same studio. How trust had always been their currency. "I don't want to believe he could do this," Ethan admitted. "But the deeper we dig, the fewer exits there are." Emma reached across the table, touching his hand. "Sometimes the people who know how to build with you also know exactly where to crack your foundation." Later that week, a silent alarm triggered in the design archives. At 3:12 a.m., Chloe's phone buzzed. By 3:30, she and Ethan were in the office, joined by Emma and a grim-faced security chief. Nothing appeared stolen, but 2 drawers were left slightly ajar. One contained early West Bay renderings, another held old financial contracts. "It's like someone's looking for specific leverage," Chloe said. "Trying to find a weak spot." Ethan stared at the camera footage, only to find static where video should be. "Internal sabotage," Emma whispered. "They knew exactly what to disable." The next day, Daniel returned from a week-long trip to Chicago. He walked into Ethan's office like nothing had happened, dropping a coffee on the desk. "You look like hell," he said cheerfully. Ethan stared at him. "Late nights. You know how it is." "No rest for the visionary," Daniel smirked, but something in his eyes flickered when Ethan didn't smile back. That evening, Emma received an anonymous email from a burner address. "Stop asking questions, or watch the bookstore burn." Attached was a photo, her standing inside the store, time-stamped 2 hours earlier. She froze. Her fingers trembled over the keyboard. Then she did what instinct told her. She called Chloe. Within 15 minutes, Chloe was at her door. "This changes everything," Chloe said, staring at the screen. "We're not just investigating a leak now. We're at war." The next day, Ethan gathered the department heads under false pretenses. "I'm reassigning responsibilities," he announced. "Until further notice, no one accesses West Bay files without me or Chloe present, not even Daniel." The room fell silent. Daniel, seated at the edge, narrowed his eyes. "What's going on, Ethan?" "Just tightening the vault," Ethan replied coolly. "Sensitive phase, too much at stake." Daniel didn't respond, but his jaw twitched ever so slightly. Emma, meanwhile, relocated to a spare office at Carter Urban. Chloe insisted on it. "You're safer here, and frankly, you're part of this now." But safety was a mirage. That night, Emma found her car door ajar. Nothing stolen, just a red thumb drive on the seat. She took it straight to Ethan. Chloe scanned it first. No malware, no traceable origin. But what they found inside made Ethan sit down slowly, as if gravity itself had changed. Internal Carter documents, plans that had never left his private drive, and a message: "Even your allies are liars." The 3 of them stared at the screen in silence. "Someone wants us to implode," Chloe muttered. "They're sowing a paranoia now." Emma looked at Ethan. "Do you trust me?" "With my life," he said, but the weight of doubt was beginning to show in his eyes. And somewhere deep in the shadows of the city, someone was counting on it. The walls inside Carter Urban Designs no longer felt like stone. They felt like pressure chambers. The team moved carefully, their glances shorter, their conversations clipped. Ethan kept his meetings brief, his doors closed. The firm was no longer just a company. It was a chessboard, and every piece was a suspect. Even Daniel, once his closest ally, now moved through the office like a man with something to hide. The quiet between them had grown so vast that words couldn't cross it anymore. Ethan sat in his office late one night, staring at the same screen he had for hours, the red flash drive Emma had found still plugged into his laptop. Every file was real. Every document dated, detailed, and accurate, and yet none should exist outside his own private system. Even your allies are liars, the message had said. It echoed in his mind like a curse. Chloe stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Someone's inside your circle," she said, "or close enough to pass for it." He looked up. "You still think it's Daniel?" "I think it's someone with access to your habits," she replied. "To your digital footprint, your handwriting. Someone who knows when you're not looking." Ethan rubbed his temples. "He's always known me better than I know myself." Chloe didn't flinch. "Then he knows exactly how to destroy you." That night, Ethan didn't go home. He stayed at his office, lights off, watching the city pulse in quiet menace. Across town, Emma lay awake in her apartment, staring at her ceiling. The threat hadn't left her, not really. Every creak, every car outside felt like a shadow sent to watch her, and yet part of her refused to run. She remembered the moment. She first saw Ethan 3 months ago, asking for a copy of The Fountainhead with the kind of sincerity that made the cliché charming instead of cringeworthy. She hadn't meant to fall into his story, but now she was tangled in it, whether she liked it or not. The next morning, Emma arrived early at the firm and found Daniel already there. He was standing in the lobby, looking out the glass doors, a coffee in hand. "Early bird," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I could say the same," she replied cautiously. "You're not usually around at 6 a.m. He turned to her, the sunlight catching a flicker of something unreadable in his face. "Things are shifting. Got to stay ahead of the tide." She nodded, then walked away without another word. Behind her, Daniel's eyes lingered for a beat too long. Later that day, Ethan held a private meeting with the City Zoning Commission. He emerged furious. "They're delaying our permit review," he told Chloe and Emma. "Suddenly, there's a question about whether our blueprints meet environmental compliance." Chloe frowned. "That makes no sense. We cross-checked everything." Ethan's voice was tight. "Someone's feeding them counter-narratives, and worse, they have alternate drafts. Ones I never signed off on." Emma looked up. "You think Daniel forged them?" "I think someone did," Ethan replied, "and Daniel's the only one with access to both our archives and our signature templates." By that evening, things had gone from bad to critical. A headline appeared online: "Carter Urban under investigation for permit manipulation." The article quoted unnamed sources from within the firm. Chloe stormed into Ethan's office with her tablet. "They're playing the long game," she said. "Slow leaks to discredit you before the bid even hits the floor. By the time the council reviews it, you'll already be painted as a fraud." Emma sat down hard. "This is exactly what they want. Uncertainty, chaos, isolation." Ethan stood up, pacing. "We need a win, something clear, undeniable." Chloe thought for a moment. "I know someone. A city clerk, quiet, reliable. She might have seen the forged documents cross her desk. If we can get her to talk, we can trace it back." Ethan nodded. "Do it." But as Chloe left, Emma caught his arm. "And what if it is Daniel?" He didn't answer. His silence said enough. That night, Emma returned to the bookstore for the first time in days. The shelves were dusty, her inbox full of rescheduled author events. But being there grounded her. She needed that. But her calm shattered when she opened the mail slot. A photo fell out, her and Ethan standing close in the office, talking, behind them barely visible through the window. Daniel. The date was just 2 days ago. And at the bottom of the photo, written in black ink, "He's always watching." Emma didn't hesitate. She rushed back to the firm. Ethan was still there, of course. He never left now. She dropped the photo on his desk. "He's watching us, not just you, us." Ethan stared at it, then at her. "This changes things." She crossed her arms. "Do you still trust him?" "No," he whispered, "but I trusted him once, and he knows how to use that." Emma leaned closer. Then it's time to stop defending the past and protect what you still have left. And for the first time since this war began, Ethan nodded without flinching. It started with silence. Ethan and Daniel sat across from each other in the glass-walled conference room, the city stretching behind them like a painting too distant to touch. Between them, a single folder, unopened, unaddressed. The room buzzed with the tension of words unsaid, truths waiting to be ripped open. Daniel sipped his coffee, then leaned back. "You wanted to talk. I'm here. So, talk." Ethan didn't move. He stared at the folder like it held a detonator. "You've been with me since day one," he said finally. "Before we had chairs, before we had investors, just paper sketches and late nights." Daniel smiled softly. "Yeah, and now we've got towers rising out of the skyline. What's this about, Ethan?" Ethan hesitated. "The firm's under scrutiny. We're being set up, files are leaking, documents are forged, permits disappearing." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And you think I'm behind it?" Not defensive, curious. "I didn't say that," Ethan replied. "Didn't have to." Daniel sat forward now, elbows on the table. "You called me in here. No assistant, no board members, just you and a file you won't open. If you didn't think it was me, this would have been a hallway chat, not an interrogation." Ethan stayed silent. Daniel chuckled. "You know what hurts? Not that you suspect me, but that you waited this long to ask." Ethan leaned back. "I didn't want to see it." Daniel's voice dropped. "Then don't." The silence returned, thicker now. Daniel looked out the window. "You built this firm on trust, Ethan. Not contracts, not NDAs. Trust. If you're walking away from that—" He shook his head. "You're walking away from the very thing that made you." Ethan stood slowly. "Then let's hope I'm wrong." He left the folder untouched. Daniel didn't look back, but as Ethan exited the room, he caught his own reflection in the glass and saw the fear in his eyes. Downstairs, Emma was waiting. She didn't speak, just handed Ethan her phone. A message had come in through the bookstore's outdated contact form. "He lies," with the same voice he used to dream. Attached, a voice recording. It was Daniel, discussing zoning swaps, bribery. Not outright admissions, but coded phrases, damning in context. Ethan played it 3 times. By the 4th, he wasn't breathing. "Where did this come from?" he asked. "Anonymous," Emma said. "But it's real. Chloe confirmed the audio's authentic. Timestamped 2 months ago, during the West Bay. Submission phase." Ethan closed his eyes. "He's been working both sides." Emma stepped closer. "So, what now?" He opened his eyes. "Now, I set the trap." That night, Ethan returned to the office alone. He left a single file on his desk, bait, blueprints for a dummy project, fake city correspondence, a password-protected USB drive that did absolutely nothing. Then he waited. At 2:14 a.m., the system pinged, a download, internal IP. Ethan didn't check who it was. He didn't need to. The next morning, Chloe met him at the firm before sunrise. "We've got him," she said. "But not enough to convict, yet." Emma arrived shortly after, eyes tired but determined. "I reached out to someone who used to work at Apex," she said. "She's scared, but she's willing to talk." Chloe raised an eyebrow. "A whistleblower?" "More like a survivor," Emma replied. "She said she'd meet tonight, but only if Ethan comes too." Ethan nodded. "Set it up." Later that evening, the 3 of them met in a parking garage 2 levels underground. The woman wore a hoodie and sunglasses, her voice shaking as she spoke. "Daniel contacted us 6 months ago, said he had access, said he wanted out, but only if he got paid." She handed them a drive. "Emails, signed NDAs, money transfers, everything." Chloe took it, expression unreadable. "Why now?" "Ibasa," woman's voice cracked, "because I heard what they're planning next, and it won't just ruin Ethan, it'll hurt everyone tied to the project." As they drove back, Ethan sat in silence. Emma glanced at him. "Are you okay?" He didn't answer right away. "He wasn't just my business partner," he said. "He was my compass, the person I measured loyalty by. And I never saw it coming." Emma took his hand gently. "Then let this be the moment you stop measuring by the past." That night, Ethan drafted an internal memo, confidential, time-stamped, with one recipient, Daniel. It read, "We need to talk. One last time. Just us." And in the shadows, Daniel smiled, because he had received it before it was ever sent. Ethan sat alone in the rooftop lounge, the city lights, stretching out like a galaxy below. The night was cold, quiet, the kind of silence that feels too deliberate, like the world was holding its breath. In his hand was a single printout, a bank transfer from Apex Terra to a shell company registered under Daniel Reed's college nickname. If there was still doubt in his heart, this erased it. What remained wasn't anger, it was grief. Daniel arrived 5 minutes late, as always, casual, confident, as if they were just meeting for a drink. "This place brings back memories," he said, pouring himself a whiskey without asking. "You remember our first investor pitch? We got laughed out of this very room." Ethan didn't smile. "I remember." Daniel took a sip. "So what's this about? You called me here like we're going to war." Ethan set the paper on the table between them. "Just needed you to see it. One last time." Daniel glanced down. He didn't flinch, just set his glass down beside it. "Took you long enough." Ethan blinked. "So it's true." Daniel leaned back, hands behind his head. "Depends what truth you're ready to hear. That I sold you out? Or that I kept this company alive when your dreams got too expensive?" His voice was calm, venomous in its casualness. "Do you even know how close we were to collapse 2 years ago?" Ethan's voice was quiet. "You could have come to me." "And said what?" Daniel snapped. "That your vision was beautiful, but unsustainable. That your refusal to play dirty would cost us everything. You would have fired me, or worse, kept believing in me." Ethan stood. "I did believe in you." Daniel's laugh was sharp. "That's what made it so easy." For a long moment neither spoke. The city moved on below, unaware of the storm above. "You didn't just betray the company," Ethan said finally. "You betrayed me. You used our friendship as cover." Daniel's smile faded. "No, Ethan, I weaponized it. And it worked, until your little bookstore girl got in the way." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Don't talk about her." "Why not?" Daniel asked. "She's the reason this fantasy of yours is still standing. You'd be bankrupt and blind without her." Ethan stepped closer, voice low and deadly. "You think you're in control, but this game, it's already over." Daniel's eyes flickered. "You don't have enough." "I've covered my tracks." "Not well enough," Ethan replied. "I have witness testimony. I have documents, and most importantly, I have your arrogance. You should have left quietly." Daniel laughed again, but it was forced now. "You won't go public. You'd ruin the firm. Then maybe it needs to be rebuilt from scratch." Daniel's expression darkened. "You think people care who's moral and who's corrupt? They care who wins." Ethan shook his head. "That's where you're wrong. They care who survives with their integrity intact." He stepped back. "This meeting was for me. Closure. The rest, that'll happen in the boardroom." Daniel stood too. "Don't make this mistake, Ethan." "Already made it," Ethan said, turning away. 16 years ago when I trusted you." Back at Carter Urban Designs, Emma was waiting. She didn't ask how the meeting went. She saw it in his eyes, the exhaustion of betrayal finally named. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him like the world might still be soft somewhere. "It's done," Ethan whispered. He admitted it, in everything but words. Emma didn't let go. "Then now we rise." Chloe entered moments later, phone in hand. "I just got off with the city clerk. She's ready to go public, on the record." Ethan's posture straightened. Then tomorrow, we go to war. Chloe nodded. The press, the board, the zoning committee, simultaneously. Emma looked between them. Do you have enough? Chloe smiled grimly. More than enough. We have the truth, and we're not the ones hiding. That night, Emma returned to her apartment for the first time in weeks. It felt hollow, foreign. She glanced at the mirror, herself, but changed. Stronger, angrier, braver. She stared at her own reflection and whispered, "You were never just a bookstore manager." As dawn broke, the city turned gold, and in the penthouse of Carter Urban Designs, Ethan Carter slipped on his suit-like armor, ready to burn down the lies and build something honest from the ashes. The boardroom was colder than usual. Glass, walls, steel chairs, the sun glaring off a table polished to perfection. Ethan stood at the head of it, spine straight, his face unreadable. 12 board members filled the seats, murmuring among themselves. At the far end sat Daniel, posture, relaxed, blazer unbuttoned, like a man too confident to wear armor. Chloe entered first, followed by Emma, who carried a laptop and a locked folder. Ethan began without preamble. Thank you all for coming. What we discuss today determines not only the future of this firm, but its soul. A few eyes rolled. Daniel smirked. Let's not be dramatic, Ethan. This is about zoning discrepancies, not war crimes. Ethan didn't flinch. That's what you'd like everyone to believe, he gestured to Chloe. Councillor Carter will begin. Chloe's voice was low but deliberate. In the past 6 months, Carter Urban Designs has been the target of internal sabotage tied to a third-party development firm, Apex Terror. We have identified forged documents, off-books transfers, unauthorized city permit alterations and planted leaks, all traceable to one person. She opened the folder. Mr. Daniel Reed. The room exploded. Voices rose. Hands flew. Disbelief echoed. Daniel didn't move. You're bluffing, he said. You have no idea what you're accusing me of. Chloe remained calm. We have a digital trail. We have an insider witness from Apex. And we have a direct bank transaction from Apex to a shell company under your former alias. She placed the bank slip in front of each board member. Daniel leaned back, lips tightening. Fabricated. Ethan stepped forward. Is that what this is? He tapped the speaker on the table. Emma clicked the laptop. Daniel's voice filled the room, his conversation from the garage, every word distinct, every intention unveiled. When the recording ended, silence reigned. Daniel's face went still, then paler. That could be anyone. Chloe raised her phone. We have audio authentication, time-stamped, verified. You're finished. A board member cleared his throat. Daniel, do you deny this? Daniel stood. I deny nothing I haven't signed, and I suggest we take this discussion offline before lawyers start circling. Chloe laughed coldly. They already have. In fact, she gestured toward the glass doors. 2 legal representatives from the city council stepped in. Mr. Reed, one said, you're being served with a formal injunction pending criminal investigation. Daniel turned to Ethan. You're doing this to me. Ethan stepped closer. You did it to yourself. You had everything, trust, legacy, partnership, and you burned it all for leverage. Daniel's eyes darkened. You're weak, Ethan. You let people in. That's always been your flaw. Ethan nodded slowly. Then I'd rather be flawed than false. Security arrived minutes later. Daniel didn't fight. He straightened his collar, looked one last time at the room he helped build, and walked out without another word. The doors closed behind him like the final beat of a gavel. Ethan turned to the board. There will be fallout, headlines, questions, but we will answer them with honesty, with proof. This firm survives because it was built on purpose, and we don't compromise that, not for profit, not for pride. The board nodded, slowly at first, then with rising conviction. After the meeting, Emma found Ethan alone in the conference room, hands resting on the table, eyes glassy. She approached quietly. "You did what had to be done." He nodded, voice rough. "Doesn't make it easier." She took his hand. "No, but it makes it worth it." Chloe joined them. A moment later, Council's issuing a statement tomorrow. The West Bay bid is still live, and we're the front runners again. Ethan looked at both women. "I couldn't have done this without you." Chloe smiled. "Don't make me emotional. I still have 2 lawsuits to file today." Emma laughed, softly. "So, what now?" Ethan looked out the window, the skyline no longer distant but within reach. "Now we rebuild, smarter, cleaner, together." Outside, Daniel's car disappeared into traffic, his legacy in ruins and the empire he tried to steal restored by the very loyalty he tried to destroy. The building was quieter than Ethan had ever heard it. No phones rang, no heels clicked against the tile, no voices echoed down the hall. It was the silence of survival. What comes after the last shot is fired, but before the wounds fully begin to sting. He stood in his office, blazer discarded, tie undone, hands gripping the edge of the window frame. The skyline outside hadn't changed, but everything else had. Emma stood in the doorway, watching him with quiet concern. She didn't say anything at first, just let the silence sit with them like a shared burden. Finally, she walked to his side, setting down 2 coffees, one for him, one for her. "I figured today called for caffeine and stillness." Ethan accepted the cup without looking at her. "He's gone, but it doesn't feel like victory." Emma nodded. "That's because it wasn't a win. It was a sacrifice." He turned to her. "I keep thinking about the first year we opened. This office. Me, Daniel, a secretary who quit after 3 weeks, and a receptionist who doubled as our accountant." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "We had no clue what we were doing, but we trusted each other. That was enough." Emma sat on the edge of his desk. "What changed?" Ethan stared at the skyline again. "Nothing, that's the problem. I changed, I grew, he didn't." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that feels earned. Eventually Emma asked, "What now?" Ethan's answer was slow. "Now we clean house, rebuild the board, restructure our oversight, and He hesitated. "I take a breath." "For the first time in months," Emma smiled. "You deserve it." "So do you," he replied softly. Later that day, Chloe held a short press conference. Clean, clear, public. She laid out the facts, confirmed Daniel's removal, and reaffirmed Carter Urban's commitment to ethical urban development. Ethan watched it from a back room, unseen, anonymous. When it ended, he turned to Emma. "She's more terrifying than any developer I've ever met." Emma grinned. "That's why. She wins." That evening, for the first time in weeks, they didn't go back to the office. Ethan and Emma walked the city instead, through streets designed by his hand, now reclaimed by their steps. They stopped at the bookstore. Emma unlocked the door and turned on the lights. The space smelled like memory, paper and ink and calm. Ethan walked the aisles slowly. "You were right to tell me, back then, when you first heard Apex." Emma watched him from behind the counter. "I wasn't brave. I was scared, but silence felt worse." He approached her, standing on the opposite side of the register like he had on that first day. "You know, I used to come here just to escape, sit in the corner, pretend the city didn't need building for an hour or 2. Emma tilted her head. "Why didn't you ever say that?" "Because back then, I didn't know I needed escape." He stepped closer. "But now I know I need more than that." The space between them narrowed. Ethan reached for her hand, tentative at first, then firmer. "You were the one constant while everything else was falling apart." Emma didn't speak. Her silence said enough. He leaned forward, and this time there was no hesitation, no interruption, no fear. Their kiss was quiet, but full of everything. They'd survived. Later, as they sat behind the counter sharing a leftover bottle of wine from a forgotten book launch, Ethan said, "I think I'm going to step back from the firm." Emma blinked. "What?" "Not permanently," he clarified, "but for a few months. Let Chloe handle the restructuring, let my team breathe, and let me figure out who I am without war." Emma rested her head on his shoulder. "And what will you do with all that free time?" He smiled. "I was hoping to spend some of it here." She looked up at him. "Ethan Carter shelving books. That's a headline," he laughed. "Maybe I'll start with reading them." They clinked glasses. "To rebuilding," he said. "Not just towers," Emma added. "Hearts, too." Outside, the city kept moving, but inside the quiet haven, of old pages and new beginnings, two people, damaged, tired but not broken, finally let themselves rest. The days that followed felt like borrowed time. Ethan no longer woke with his mind already sprinting. The firm ran under Chloe's guidance, with ruthless efficiency. Emma returned to her bookstore routine, but with a difference. Every moment felt heavier now, as if something deep within her had shifted. She was no longer just managing shelves and events. She had stepped into the storm and survived. That changes you. Ethan visited the bookstore almost every afternoon, not always to see Emma, at least not officially. Sometimes he came just to sit by the window and read. Other times he helped restock. Once she caught him reorganizing the architecture section alphabetically. "You're not subtle," she teased. He shrugged. "You let the poetry shelves live in chaos." It was time someone took a stand. But beneath the playfulness, something unspoken lingered. Emma began to notice the way Ethan hesitated when talking about the future. He spoke of projects in vague terms, of time off with no clear endpoint. One night after closing, she finally asked, "Are you really coming back to the firm?" He looked at her, expression unreadable. "I don't know. That place, it has pieces of Daniel in its walls. I built my name next to his. Now I'm not sure what's left that's truly mine." Emma reached across the table and took his hand. "Then build something new, not to prove anything, just to belong to yourself again." He smiled, but there was sadness in it. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," she said, "but it's honest." One evening, Chloe invited them both to a small rooftop dinner, a celebration of surviving, as she put it. Over pasta and laughter, the three of them finally breathed, like people, not like players on a battlefield. At one point, Chloe raised a toast. "To Emma," she said, "the woman who didn't owe us anything, and still saved everything." Emma blushed. Ethan just smiled like someone watching sunlight return after a long grey winter. But the peace didn't last. That week, Emma received a package at the bookstore, no return address. Inside, a sealed envelope with one sentence written on it. "You think this is over?" Inside the envelope was a USB drive, just like the last. Ethan plugged it in on Chloe's encrypted laptop. What they found wasn't data, but video. Surveillance. Footage of Chloe entering the zoning committee building, of Emma locking the bookstore, of Ethan and Emma sitting on a park bench days prior. Chloe froze. This is more than backlash. It's surveillance-level obsession. Ethan's jaw tightened. Someone else is still out there. Someone who didn't fall with Daniel. Emma stared at the screen. What if Apex wasn't working alone? Chloe's fingers flew across the keyboard. "We need to trace this immediately. This isn't over." But before the adrenaline could spike too high, the drive triggered a wipe protocol. The screen blinked and everything was gone. Ethan slammed the laptop shut. "They're not just watching. They're sending a message." Emma looked at him. "What kind of message?" he answered softly. that this fight never really ends. The tension returned, slow and creeping like fog. But this time, they weren't broken by it. They were prepared. Chloe reached out to her contacts, pulled strings, made quiet threats. Emma began keeping logs, screenshots, details. Ethan, he returned to the firm, not to rebuild, but to investigate. Quietly, strategically. But amidst the new storm, something different also grew. One night, after a long day of silence and countermeasures, Ethan and Emma sat in her apartment, wine untouched between them. "I was thinking," he said, voice low, "about the apartment above the bookstore." Emma raised an eyebrow. "What about it? It's empty, right? Has great light, enough space for someone to draw blueprints and forget the world exists." She tilted her head. "You want to move in?" He hesitated. "I want to stop, pretending I don't want to be where you are, and if we're going to fight whatever this is, I don't want to do it from across the city." Emma didn't speak at first, then she nodded. "Okay, but if you reorganize the poetry section, again, we're going to have problems." He laughed, and for the first time in weeks, it wasn't a laugh weighed down by memory. It was just joy. The next morning came with a knock. Not a hard one. Gentle, unassuming, but the kind that made Ethan's instincts flare. He opened the door to find an envelope taped to it. No return name, just a word scribbled in heavy ink. Foundation. Inside, a single page. A project blueprint, hand-drawn. The design was unmistakably Carter Urban's, but dated over a decade ago. A project that had never been built. One Ethan didn't even remember drafting. He stared at it for several minutes, before calling Chloe. "This is from the very first batch of proposals we submitted, when Daniel and I were still trying to get funding. We shelved this idea, or I thought we did." Chloe frowned, examining the paper. "This wasn't filed through the firm, no digital trace, no paper trail. This was personal." Emma entered, catching the tension mid-breath. "What's going on?" Ethan handed her the paper. She examined the sketch, her brows tightening. "Someone wants you to remember this." By afternoon, Chloe's research uncovered something troubling. That blueprint? It had been submitted, under Ethan's name, to the zoning board in 2014, quietly, privately, and then it had been purchased by a holding company based in the Cayman Islands. "This was never shelved," she said. "It was stolen, repurposed, and someone made millions off your original design, without you ever knowing." Ethan sat down hard. This wasn't Daniel. We were in survival mode then. He couldn't have pulled something this complex. Chloe crossed her arms. "Which means there's someone else, someone older, deeper." Emma said quietly, "A ghost in the foundation." Ethan looked at her, eyes heavy. "Exactly that." The next clue came from an unexpected source. Mia, Emma's oldest friend and occasional bookstore assistant, brought in a box of old architecture journals from a storage clean-out. "These yours?" she asked. Ethan blinked. "Yeah, these were from my college days." One of them had sticky notes in a different handwriting. "Daniel's? No." Chloe confirmed it. It belonged to Anthony Westin, Ethan's first mentor, a legendary architect who had vanished from the public eye in 2015 after a fraud investigation. They hadn't thought of him in years. Westin had been the first man to believe in Ethan and Daniel's vision, but also the first to suggest they compromise to survive. "You want your firm to grow," Westin once said. "You'll need to stop waiting for morality to sign your checks." Ethan had walked away. Daniel hadn't. The idea hit Ethan like lightning. What if Daniel didn't orchestrate everything alone? What if he was working for someone? Chloe nodded. "Westin. He's a ghost, which makes him perfect." Emma stood. "Then it's time to bring a ghost back to life." The trio divided tasks. Chloe began searching legal trails, shell companies, land transfers, tax havens. Emma used the bookstore network, authors, reporters, urban planning contacts to hunt whispers. Ethan dove into old firm archives, looking for anything tied to the Blueprint's ID code. Within days, the pieces converged. Westin had created a string of shadow companies every time Carter Urban dropped a project. One of these shells acquired the zoning rights weeks later, quietly, then sold them years later for profit. It was a pattern, one stretching back 10 years, a silent heist of Ethan's early career. But what alarmed them most wasn't the past, it was the future. A recent permit submission under a shell name matched a design Ethan had only shown to Chloe and Emma. It wasn't public, had never been saved digitally, which meant someone wasn't just watching, they were inside. Emma whispered it first. "We have a mole." Chloe's eyes darkened. "Then let's smoke them out." That night, Ethan and Emma sat in the bookstore, surrounded by books, blueprints, and a storm they hadn't invited, but now owned. Ethan turned to her. "You once said people care about what survives, not just what wins." Emma nodded. "And we're surviving." He took her hand. "Then let's make sure this time we write the blueprint." And in a hidden office, far from the city lights, Anthony Westin watched them on an encrypted screen, the corner of his mouth curling into a familiar chilling smile. It started with a coffee spill, a mistake so ordinary it almost passed unnoticed. One of the junior architects at Carter Urban, Lauren, a sharp but quiet presence, knocked over her cup during a team meeting. In her scramble to clean it, her tablet fell. The screen cracked and revealed something underneath a plastic case. A flash drive taped to the back. Chloe was the one who saw it. Her eyes narrowed instantly. "What's that?" Lauren froze. Her silence said more than any words could. Within minutes, she was in a conference room with Chloe, Ethan, and security. The flash drive was scanned. Password protected but crude. Not professional espionage, just copied documents. Dozens of them. Sensitive, internal, and recent. Lauren broke under pressure. "I didn't know who he really was," she said, tears running unchecked. "He said he was a consultant, Anthony Westin. He found me through a mentor program, offered me job security, promised I'd never be invisible again." Ethan's stomach turned. "And you gave him our plans?" "Just older drafts. Then, more. He said he'd help me get promoted." Her voice cracked. "He never even paid me." Chloe's expression was stone. "Westin's manipulating a network of pawns. Lauren wasn't the first. She won't be the last." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "He's not trying to destroy the firm. He's trying to reclaim it, brick by brick, like we owe him something." Emma said quietly, "He doesn't want to beat you. He wants to rewrite your legacy, as if it was always his." That night, Ethan went through his oldest sketchbooks. He found notes, phrases Westin used during his mentorship. One in particular struck him. "Vision is just memory, recycled forward." Westin didn't just want profit, he wanted credit. Everything Carter Urban had become, he believed, had been born from his mind and stolen by Ethan. "Classic narcissistic delusion," Chloe muttered. "But dangerous, especially when wrapped in charm and regret." Emma stood. "So how do we counter someone who's not trying to win, just rewrite history?" Ethan looked at her. "We don't fight him in public. We fight him in the foundation. Where he first entered, they launched Project Nova the next morning. A fake proposal, beautiful, viable, and entirely fabricated. Ethan spread whispers through internal channels, just enough to draw interest. Lauren, still on probation, but now working with Chloe, confirmed the bait was taken. Within 48 hours, the proposal was submitted by one of Westin's shell companies. Emma stared at the confirmation printout. "It worked. He's predictable. Chloe smiled. Now we follow the paper trail and end him. But Ethan looked less triumphant. This isn't over. He's going to come at us personally next. He wants more than just designs. He wants our narrative. That evening, a courier arrived at the bookstore. No name, no address, just a box. Inside, Ethan's old college sketchbook, one he hadn't seen in over a decade. Emma flipped through it, then stopped. In the back, a page had been added. A note in Weston's handwriting. Even your dreams began in my mind. Let's not pretend you're anything more than an echo. Emma's voice shook. He's inside your past, Ethan, inside your memory. Ethan stared at the page, then tore it out. Then I burn the echo and speak in my own voice now. They knew what would come next. Confrontation. Not through lawyers or counsels, but through something far more raw. Truth exposed. The invitation came in the form of a single email. No greeting, no signature. Just a location, Evanston Foundry, 11 p.m. Come alone. Ethan stared at the screen, jaw tight. He wants to control the setting, Chloe said. He thinks he's directing the scene. Then let him, Ethan replied. I want to look him in the eye. Emma grabbed his arm. You're not going without backup. Ethan shook his head. If I don't go alone, he disappears. He's orchestrated this entire game. From the shadows, this is the only chance we have to draw him out. Chloe nodded reluctantly. We'll be nearby, but keep your mic live. Ethan didn't argue. The Evanston Foundry stood abandoned on the city's edge. Steel bones rusting, windows shattered by time. Ethan entered, the echo of his footsteps stretching out like ghosts greeting him. The air smelled of oil and old fire. And there, beneath the skeletal frame of a half-built ceiling, stood Anthony Weston, older, thinner, but every bit as composed. Ethan, he said, smiling like a proud father who never earned the title, still walking like you're carrying the world. That never changed. Ethan stopped a few feet away. Why now, Anthony? Weston spread his hands. Because you made noise, because you started remembering, and I've always preferred control. You stole from me, Ethan said. You twisted students into pawns. You used my trust to build a shadow empire. Weston raised an eyebrow. And what did you build, Ethan? A firm built on idealism, a cityscape that rejected you until you sold your soul. Please, you needed my cynicism to survive. I rejected your cynicism, Ethan growled. I built despite it. Weston's smile thinned. You think Daniel turned because of greed? He turned because you became soft. You believed the lie that buildings could be moral. I taught him how to see the world as it is. You destroyed him, Ethan snapped, and you'll destroy anyone who listens to you. Weston took a slow step forward. Not destroy, refine. You weren't ready to lead, Ethan. You were too busy dreaming. I protected your legacy by taking what you couldn't handle. There was a beat of silence. Ethan's hands clenched. This ends tonight. Weston chuckled. Does it, or does it restart? He handed Ethan a folder. Inside, designs, brilliant ones, bearing Ethan's original sketches but warped, twisted into something dark, efficient and profitable. Projects already submitted for review. Under Carter Urban's name. You used our name, Ethan hissed. Legally, Weston said. Your junior associate filed them on your behalf. She believed it was pre-approved. Ethan felt his world shift. You've already infiltrated the next phase. And soon, Weston said softly, your own firm will choose my designs over yours, not because they're better, but because they're easier to sell. Ethan took a breath. You're wrong about one thing. Weston tilted his head. Which is good? This isn't your city anymore. You're not invisible. And your empire's cracked. He turned to leave. Weston didn't follow, but his voice carried like metal scraping concrete. You still don't get it, Ethan. I'm not your rival. I'm your reflection. And every time you build, I'll be waiting in the blueprint. Outside, Chloe and Emma were waiting near the car. Ethan approached in silence, tossed the folder onto the back seat, and got in. Emma didn't speak. She just reached for his hand. Chloe drove. None of them looked back at the foundry. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat on the floor of his apartment, sketchbook open, staring at a blank page. Then slowly, he began to draw. Not a building, but a framework. Not for profit, for protection, for legacy, for truth. The morning after the meeting, Ethan stood at the center of Carter Urban's empty blueprint room. Dozens of his original designs were spread out on the long table, some dating back a decade. He studied them as if seeing them for the first time. In every stroke there was hope, defiance and vulnerability. But in some, there were echoes of Weston's influence. Subtle, seductive. The realization made his chest tighten. Emma entered, quietly, a mug of tea in her hands. "You didn't sleep," he shook his head. "I saw him, Emma, not just Weston. The man I almost became. I see him in these lines. I thought I left him behind when I rejected him years ago, but pieces of him followed me into every project." She set the tea down. "Then maybe now is when you finally redraw the lines." Chloe joined them moments later, eyes sharp as always. Legal confirmed it. Weston's shell firm used a Carter Urban sublicense to submit the fake projects. Technically, it's not illegal, but ethically? She let the silence answer. "He's clever, but not invincible." Ethan turned to her. "Then let's make him visible. Let's expose everything." They created a strategy, a public architectural review forum, live-streamed. Carter Urban would voluntarily open all pending project proposals for public scrutiny in a rare act of transparency. The bait: they would include Weston's altered designs under their banner, letting the public compare them against Ethan's originals. "It's bold," Chloe said, "and risky." Ethan nodded. "But it's honest. Let's see what the world really values." Emma smiled. "Real structures for real people. That's what you promised the city years ago." Ethan looked at her. "Then let's remind them." They spent 3 days preparing. The Carter Urban office became a hive of controlled chaos. Staff members, inspired by Ethan's vulnerability and clarity, rallied behind him. Even Lauren, once Weston's pawn, took the lead in redesigning the public portal. "I owe this firm the truth," she told Emma, "and myself a second chance." The night before the live stream, Ethan and Emma sat on the bookstore's rooftop, staring at the lights. "Do you think this will be enough?" he asked. Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. "It has to be, because it's not about destroying him anymore. It's about making sure no one ever follows him again." The next day, the event launched. Architects, critics, students, city officials, all tuned in. Ethan stood before a large panel of judges and citizens. His speech was brief, direct. This firm was founded on transparency. Somewhere along the way, shadows tried to reclaim it. Today, we bring it back into the light. One by one, the designs were reviewed. The contrast was brutal. Ethan's plan spoke of community, inclusion, and beauty. Weston's, they were sterile, profitable, emotionless. When questioned, Chloe stepped in with evidence, emails, signatures, time-stamped edits, all pointing to Weston's manipulation. Then, the final moment. Chloe played a recorded call between Weston and a foreign investor, bragging about how the boy builds the face. "I shape the bones." The audience erupted. Incredulity, anger, applause. Weston's face appeared nowhere that day, but his legacy shattered in real time. That night, Carter Urban's website crashed from traffic. Media outlets picked up the story. Architect betrayed mentor, rebuilds with truth. The fall of Anthony Weston begins. And more importantly, messages flooded in. from young. Architects who had once worked under Weston's rule. They shared their own stories, their own silencing. Emma read some aloud to Ethan in bed. One message ended simply, "Thank you for showing us that integrity is still possible." Ethan turned to her, brushing her hair back gently. "We're not done." "Not yet," she agreed. "But maybe now we can start building for real." Outside, the city breathed easier, and in the quiet hum of street lamps and old bricks, something new was taking shape, not just in steel and concrete, but in truth. The days after the live stream felt surreal. The media storm passed quickly, like most do. Weston vanished. Again. No public statement, no lawsuit, just silence. But this time his absence wasn't ominous. It was impotent. Carter Urban's leadership doubled down on transparency, launching a mentorship initiative and revising every policy tied to proprietary design. Internally, the company was smaller, leaner, but clearer. Ethan declined interviews, not out of guilt, but out of peace. He didn't need to narrate the victory. He had finally stopped fighting for approval and started working from conviction. Most days he spent his mornings at Carter Urban and his afternoons upstairs from the bookstore, drafting blueprints that didn't need validation. Emma had returned to her bookstore fully, but she wasn't the same. She now ran monthly workshops on ethics in creative professions, drawing authors, designers, and architects into cross-field conversations. The store was thriving, not because of the headlines, but because the community had seen her heart and trusted it. One afternoon, as she was restocking shelves, she looked up to find Ethan leaning against the counter. "You're smiling?" he said. "That's always dangerous." She grinned. "A new shipment came in. Stories people have waited months to read. That's worth smiling over." Ethan handed her a folded paper. "I've been sketching something. Not a tower, something smaller, something we could live in." Emma opened it. It was a floor plan, compact, cozy, with a studio, a reading alcove, and a roof terrace. "You designed us a home," she whispered. "Not just a place to sleep," Ethan said, "a place to begin again." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She nodded. "Then let's build it. Together." That weekend, Chloe invited them to dinner, a celebration. "I'm leaving Carter Urban," she announced over dessert. "You're what?" Ethan blinked. "Starting my own legal consultancy, focused on ethical reform for creative businesses, inspired by, well, you two." Emma smiled. "That's the most Chloe move ever." Chloe raised her glass. "To legacies rebuilt." After dessert, Ethan and Emma walked home hand in hand. The night air was brisk but soft. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The fight?" "Some days," he said honestly, "but I like this more, the quiet, the building, not just the battling." Emma looked at him. "And us?" He stopped walking. "That's not something I'd ever fight. That's something I chose." She kissed him. Not like a grand gesture, but like sealing something that had long been decided in silence, a promise made real. In the weeks that followed, construction began on their small home. Ethan worked with local students and interns, offering it as a teaching project. Emma helped design the interior, blending comfort and warmth with elegance. The project became symbolic, a structure built not from ambition, but from survival. One morning, Ethan found an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. One of his earliest designs, signed at the bottom. Even echoes fade eventually. Weston's handwriting. But this time the message carried no threat, only closure. He didn't mention it to Emma. He simply burned the photo in their rooftop fire pit and watched the ash dissolve into the wind. Their house was completed in the fall. The first night they slept there, the city was quiet. No sirens, no deadlines, just them, and a home that held no shadows. As they stood by the window, watching the lights flicker across buildings Ethan had once dreamed of shaping. Emma whispered, "You did it." Ethan pulled her closer. "No, we did." And in the quiet hum of this new chapter, they both knew the most important thing they'd ever build wouldn't be made of steel or stone. It would be this: a life, fragile, hard-earned and deeply human. 1 year later, the city felt familiar again. Not in the way that cities usually are, fast, blurred, indifferent, but in the way a place feels when you've walked through fire and come out with calloused feet and an open heart. Ethan stood on the edge of a rooftop garden, their rooftop, watching the sun rise over the skyline he once tried to conquer. Behind him, Emma poured coffee in the kitchen. Their kitchen, small, filled with books and mismatched mugs and the smell of cinnamon. She carried 2 cups out and handed him one, then leaned against his side in silence. "It still doesn't feel real sometimes," she murmured. "That it's over." Ethan looked at her. "It's not over. It's just quieter." Carter. Urban thrived under new leadership, shaped by transparency and purpose. Chloe's firm had already helped reform ethics policies in 4 major creative agencies. Westin, no one had seen him since. Rumors surfaced occasionally, but they died just as quickly. The ghost had lost his power because no one feared his shadow anymore. Emma's bookstore became more than a space. It became a meeting point for people with ideas and questions. She started a quarterly journal called Foundation, where voices from architecture, literature, and law shared their truths. The first edition's cover, a photograph of a half-built wall with ivy creeping over it. The caption, "Some ruins deserve roots." One autumn morning, Ethan received a letter in the mail, handwritten, from Lauren. She had started her own boutique firm, focusing on community-centered design. "You taught me more in your silence than Westin ever did in his lectures," she wrote. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Ethan placed the letter on his desk and stared at it for a long time. It was proof that not everything broken stays that way. Later that evening, Ethan and Emma hosted a small dinner, just a few close friends, Chloe, Mia, some interns who had become family. As the night waned, Emma stood and tapped her glass. "A toast," she said, "to everything we never planned, and everything we decided to protect anyway." Ethan raised his glass. "And to every wall we chose not to build so we could let someone in." As laughter filled the space, Ethan glanced at a sketch he'd pinned on the wall of their studio. It was an unfinished drawing of a home, not theirs, just a new idea. One he hadn't shown anyone yet, Emma noticed. "A new project?" she asked. He nodded. "Maybe." "What's it for?" she asked. Ethan met her gaze. "Someone who hasn't found their foundation yet. Maybe we can help them build it." She smiled. "Always building. Always hoping," he corrected. That night, as the city fell asleep, around them, Ethan and Emma stood on their rooftop, the stars dim but persistent. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you miss the war?" "Sometimes," he whispered, "but not the scars, just the clarity." She nodded. "Me too." They stayed like that for a long time, 2 people who had almost been undone by ambition, betrayal, and memory. But instead of breaking, they had chosen to bend, to adapt, to believe again. In the studio below, a blank page waited for Ethan, but for once he didn't rush to fill it. Some blueprints are better drawn slowly. After all, the strongest designs are the ones that learn to hold what matters most. And this time, Ethan Carter wasn't building alone. Wow, what a story, right? I'd love to hear what you thought. Drop a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tell me where you're watching from. And hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out the other stories we have on the channel. There's so much more waiting for you.